Thanks, Riley, and thanks for putting me on after Andy and Benjamin. I am now feeling very humble and transparent, and perhaps one of those elephants that you're going to sort of examine from all angles, sort of being a practitioner. This is me, Kirsten Firth, Brighton and Hove City Council. We are looking in a sort of across a whole range of things that what we're doing on carbon neutral at the moment, energy being one of them. So we are very lucky. We have the clarity of having a zero carbon target by 2030. Sorry, that should actually say carbon neutral, so it's not clear at all, in fact. Now, we introduced this target in the council in January 2019, and at the time somebody cynical said, give it a year and there'll be something else coming along, and look where we are now, coronavirus. So actually political realities change very fast, but actually there is a lot of dedication to maintaining that carbon neutral target. So one of the things that we've been doing as part of that work is producing an energy plan, which actually goes right across the Greater Brighton area. And we've had an energy working group, and very thankful to Raleigh and to Tim for actually supporting that work over the last while. So Greater Brighton is that area there that you can see. It covers 7 local authorities across East and West Sussex and Brighton. It's looking at opportunities for energy infrastructure, decarbonisation and economic growth. So we've looked at power, heat and transport, those being the main sources of carbon emissions. So that energy working group is perhaps one of those experimental ways of looking at how people can work together on carbon, and it's included local authorities across the region, business, community energy, universities and gas and electricity suppliers, and that's actually been one of the real strengths of it, and it's grown and grown over the period that we've been working together. I thought I would just look briefly at some of the things that we're working on heat. Now, I don't sort of need to tell you this. We're very severely locked into gas as a method of heating in the UK. But some of the reasons why are actually that people are very lacking in awareness of alternative methods. So I was sitting in a meeting recently, Lewes District Council, engaging with members of the community, people who are like really engaged in this sort of thing, the sort of people who are early adopters of batteries, water recycling, that sort of thing. 3 of the people in the room were actually in the process of renovating their homes, and they said, we don't know what to do about heating. We don't know what method to put in. And these are the people who, you know, if anybody was going to know about it, it's them. They said they didn't know. So there's this sort of, there's a whole range of diverse technologies, different methods, different scales. There's a lack of confidence in installation skills and maintenance, and everybody's making those decisions individually, and I think that makes it really difficult to think about heating. Our housing infrastructure doesn't help. Only around 2% of homes are built new every year. The rest of it, you know, we have to think about retrofitting, and that's actually a major job. You can't just plug and play. But finally, a different user experience. This is what developers tend to say when we start trying to engage with them about looking at different kinds of heating. They say people want to have operability within their own homes. They want to know that it's their heating, it's their decision about managing it, and they want to pay for it individually. Has anybody heard of the phrase a placebo radiator? Has anyone heard the phrase? So this is where in passive house buildings where the energy demand is extremely low, the insulation is very good, the idea is that it's a pretty constant heat all year round. But actually, what people want is a radiator. They want to be able, when they feel cold, they want to turn that radiator on, they want to go and stand next to the radiator, they want to feel that radiant heat coming off. So people in Exeter, some of our colleagues in Exeter Council who are have been working on passive houses as new social housing for the last 10 years, are actually putting one little radiator in their passive house dwellings to satisfy that wish for an immediate source of heat. So that's actually one of the things that we have to get used to. Although, you know, we've been through many heating changes in the past. So Raleigh asked us to think about who are the actors and the stakeholders who are not well engaged. And so I've put down there what I think it is. You may have different ideas. Developers of new housing, residents, and people who are fuel poor. So developers, part of my job is actually looking at planning applications coming into the council, looking for planning permission for large-scale new developments. So I can actually see the changing. I mean, I've only been there for 8 months, but even in that time period, we're starting to see new heating solutions coming through. They're not always good ones, though. The developers are aware of, for example, the Future Homes Standard, which will radically change the carbon reduction standards that new homes have to meet. So they sort of know that's coming. They sort of know that that's going to mean they can't put in gas boilers anymore. So what kind of heating are they suggesting instead? Basically, it's individual electric resistive heaters. This is, I mean, it's a reasonably sort of effective form of heating, but it's very expensive to run. So that's not a good solution. It's like the sort of the decision, the process that leads to that decision is basically about cost. Developers do not like heat pumps because they don't really trust them, and they don't like communal heating systems because they require a plant room which takes up space, and it requires lots of pipe work going through the building, which needs maintenance and can go wrong, and it's something else for the management committee the management company to think about. So for them, for a developer, individual electric heating is actually a good solution, but it's not such a good solution for the people who are going to live there. On fuel poverty, I would just say, like, why do we still not join up our fuel poverty policies with our low carbon policies? You know, we talk about them in completely separate spaces. There's been a few small scale attempts to join them up, but it's on the whole, doesn't happen. So what are we trying to do as a local authority to try and overcome some of those barriers to getting good heating systems in our town, in our city? We're looking at creating demand for early deployment, try and build up those supply chains, creating that energy plan that we just talked about, and using our convening ability, our ability to actually bring people together across the city, to talk to people, to look at different solutions. And of course, regulation and enforcement is probably where it comes down to in the end, and I think this is probably where we're going to have to go. Working with developers. So planning applications I've already mentioned, that's one of the key points at which we get to talk to developers. Some of them do want to talk to us, some of them are willing to discuss their options. Others just want to do it, quick and cheap. Building regulations, again, we do have some role in enforcement there, but we have very little ability to enforce post actual building, and a lot can happen. A lot can happen between a building going through planning permission and actually being built. So that's not great either. Future Home Standard, again, I've mentioned that as a potential way forward in future, but it doesn't tackle fabric energy efficiency standards. Local authority building, we actually are now in the very lucky position of being able to do some new building of social housing, and it gives us the opportunity to try to demonstrate what is actually possible. And you may be aware of the REBA Sterling Prize in 2019 went to a local authority social housing scheme, which was hailed in a somewhat condescending fashion by the architects as a modest, sorry, I haven't got my notes here, but a modest miracle or something like that. We are actually trying to develop a low carbon specification for the design of new housing, and we're doing that together with a whole range of other specialists. And here's one thing that we've done which actually is going towards that specification. We're looking at a whole life cycle assessments of heating options. So this study over there is done by Ricardo, one of our partners, but also a very large consultancy based here in Brighton, over in Shoreham. And they have done a series of assessments of ground source and air source heat pumps. And this is something which is now in the public domain that we can actually put to developers and say, look, these are it is possible to do ground source heat pumps in a way which is going to be good for you and good for your future residents. So we're trying to lead the way, but it's a small, our ability to do so is quite limited. Here's another example of a local authority scheme. This is a seniors residence with about 70 people living there, and we're putting solar panels on the roof and a ground source heat pump, and that's actually replacing existing electric heaters. So actually it's going to really cut their heating bills, and it's going to be and make it a much more comfortable place to live. Warmer homes, again, we've touched on this, and we all know the history of attempts to improve the energy efficiency of homes in this country. It's been through its ups and downs, it really has, and Green Deal, bit of a disaster. Then it all went quiet for a bit because the energy companies haven't had to contribute more recently. So, but now we're sort of really starting to look at that again. This is something which we're going to have to do in order to meet our carbon neutral targets. So the government targets are to gradually sort of make each of the bands sort of move up, so that by 2030, band C of an EPC is so that all properties have got up to a band C. This is actually a massive undertaking, and we need. So here's a challenge to you. How do we do that? How do we engage not just with the developers, the installers, the technologies, etc., but also with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of local residents to actually make those decisions, to generate the funding, to handhold through all those decision-making things. Warmer Sussex is a new enterprise, and one which is intended to sort of handhold people through that process. And actually, I'll just mention here, because I don't think I've got a slide on it, but one of our sort of key partners in this whole enterprise is the community energy sector. And they're in a sector which has had to innovate. They've been through a lot of ups and downs as well, you know, through cuts in funding, but also through cooperation. They have cooperated together as Community Energy South. It includes 9 or 10 different community energy companies, and they are one of the most innovative and entrepreneurial partners that we have, who are willing to go out on a limb and consider things like, let's make an entire village net zero, let's put solar panels on the railways, let's do these things which nobody else is actually prepared to do. So there we are. Here's another way of doing it. You can put a jumper on. Any questions?
I'm Lauren. I'm a researcher at Anglo-Ruskin University. And not long ago, I came across a study in the northeast of the US looking at a few states who had introduced subsidies for advanced wood boilers. And one of the actors that the state governments were trying to engage with, that they were struggling to engage with, but that they identified as a key stakeholder for this transition, were mechanics or boiler installers and repairs. And I was wondering, from your own experience in Brighton and Hove, if that stakeholder group if you've engaged with that stakeholder group successfully or not, and what the barriers are for helping educate householders about their options. Yeah, there certainly have been attempts. You may know of the Green Growth Platform, which is based at Brighton University. And they do engage specifically with that group. And there are some who are quite sort of entrepreneurial and get out there. Wood boilers, not great for the city. In a city, we can't really have them here because of the air quality issues. And also, I think we would really question now whether it's actually you can really consider it as a carbon neutral fuel. But yeah, definitely installers are one of the key players in this. And for example, if we are going to ramp up, we need to be able to have them on board. One of the things that we're thinking of doing is to have some sort of supplier framework that would give some sort of, not exactly accreditation, but that would assist small and medium-sized businesses to actually access this kind of work. But yeah, it's really important.